Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Heartland Mamas. I'm Murray Briel.
And I'm Heidi Henry, and we're coming to you from our studio at the edge of the Great Red Divide.
Be sure to find us on any place you get your favorite podcasts, as well as YouTube and demcastusa.com.
Look for us at Heartland Mamas, MAMAS.com. Like, follow, share, and subscribe.
Talking about podcasts and media has led us to where we are today.
And today, Murray, we're going to talk about whatever happened to the Fairness Doctrine.
Fair and equal representation and information? What?
That's how, Murray, remember when we were growing up? That's how things were. If you gave 20 minutes to Sam, you had to give 20 minutes to Dan, or it was no bueno. You couldn't do it at all.
Absolutely. And then it became even more important in 1949 when the Fairness Doctrine was instituted.
Right.
And the Fairness Doctrine is not that both two parties had to have equal time. It was that matters of national interest or controversial matters must be given equal representation in any
if you're going to talk
news
about
platform.
Cutting down trees, you also had to talk about the pros and cons of that. It was just how we operated as a country. We had this fairness doctrine so that all sides could be represented in the media, so you could know all the different sides.
Heidi is 100% right here. It actually says in the doctrine itself, the purpose is to ensure that viewers are exposed to diversity.
Right, to diversity
Of point of view.
But
I messed that
but
up.
then no, that's okay because we have to understand what happened to it and why and why we have the type of media we have now.
So 1949, they realized that television and radio was expanding, and they had the foresight, the thinking ahead to go, hey, we need to protect the country from this.
Right,
So we
because
created the Fairness Doctrine.
the influence was so vast because people could just sit now and absorb the news could be just poured over them, where before they had to read or really study or find time to listen to the radio to get the news. Now it was just washing over them in the form of television. And that was a brand new platform. That was, they were trying to figure it out. For most of our audience, they probably don't remember a time without TV. TV's been part of my life, my entire life. And the Fairness Doctrine, too, until, dun, 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 Ronald Reagan.
Right. So the Fairness Doctrine was tested over time. And it really started to be eroded back in the 60s when, in 1969, with Red Lion Media versus the FCC. And that was a case where they were accused of not giving equal representation. And the Supreme Court said, FCC, you really should, but they did not demand that they do it. And in not demanding that they follow the law, they gave leeway to the FCC to start to change and control what we see.
Well, not change and control, erode.
Erode, thank you. That's
erode the controls that we had
Erode.
so that we didn't have to have fairness as a pre-qualifier.
So we didn't have to have a diversity of viewpoints.
Right, because God, who wants diversity? She says facetiously.
So as time went on,
we
the
had this
value of syndication, the value of being able to take one show and broadcast it nationally increased. It
became reality. That wasn't a reality before. It used to be these little local stations, and there was no network coverage until later in television history. But in the course of our discussion, we have to enter in a villain, and I want you to picture him like Snidely Whiplash, which is a villain from our youth. One discredited Roger Ailes. Roger Ailes first got this idea under Nixon that we should have a form of state-run TV to just promote whoever the sitting president was, but specifically the president that gave credit to conservative ideology.
So Heidi brings up a great point. Roger Ailes was connected to Richard Nixon, and he was the driving force behind Nixon's election. He played off of the Southern stereotype. He's a political mastermind. He's kind of like a modern day Goebbels, if you think about it. You know, he went all the way back there, and he's instrumental in that.
Yes.
Well, somewhere in the 80s, I think we started freaking out a little bit and going, hey, the Senate and the House did, and maybe we need to start reining this in or looking at how this is important. So they attempted to codify the law.
But
Ronald Reagan vetoed it in 1987. Now let's jump back a couple years in history, shall we? Mm-hmm. We have Richard Nixon and Roger Ailes, who was the first to harness all of the multiple broadcast systems for a consistent message, push it out. He launched him. Mm-hmm. Then Roger Ailes continues building these right-wing candidates. And lo and behold, in 1984, he was brought on board for Ronald Reagan's campaign and is largely responsible for him being reelected.
And Murray, anybody who's ever listened to our broadcast or looked at any of our previous podcasts knows how much I hate Ronald Reagan. And this is another reason Heidi hates Ronald Reagan, because Ronald Reagan made things like Fox News possible. It was Roger Ailes, the discredited Roger Ailes brain trust, that got us this. And he had a puppet named Ronald Reagan that he could manipulate into doing this.
Exactly. You know, he's a master communicator and a master manipulator. He showed that with Nixon. Mm-hmm. He kicked butt with Reagan. He was also involved instrumentally with Bush. Mm-hmm. But by that point, he had started Fox News around lo and behold. But remember, we have presidential connections. We have this powerful media messaging. And he is realizing that he's wielding it. And he comes across this international media mogul,
Rupert Murdoch. Dun dun dun.
Now, Rupert Murdoch had these conservative messaging stations in the UK and in Australia where there was no fairness doctrine.
Right.
So we get the idea. The Senate, our legislative body, says we want to make sure the fairness doctrine stays in place. Ronald Reagan says, Roger Ailes pushed Ronald Reagan to where he was.
And Ailes meets Murdoch, who's got money to fund this pipe dream.
Lots of money.
Yep. So they manifested this horrible thing, this entity called Fox News. And because Ronald Reagan vetoed the fairness doctrine, we don't have in it took the next 9 years for them to keep rolling back parts of it. So
and in 1995, it disappeared altogether.
Right. And what did we get in 1996, Murray? What was the station that launched in 96?
Fox.
Yeah.
Fox News.
And they also call it news and entertainment so that they don't have to be beholden to any remnants of this fairness doctrine.
So we think about it, and then that's the start of the erosion of the average person getting information, getting both sides of the story. The reason Heidi and I started this cast was we wanted to see what real people thought. We wanted to bring you what actually happens, not just someone's opinion.
Right.
And we've talked about how, media has been conflated over time, and here's where it comes into play. Here is where, when we do not codify these things that are good and sensible, we cause serious disruptions. We have state-run TV.
Yes, we do. Fox News is state-run TV because certainly the original Ailes' original thought was to give a voice to whoever the sitting president is. However,
conservative, not all the conservative president,
right?
Conservative voice for America.
So depending on who is president, depends on what they will say about who. If it's Barack Obama, certainly they lambast him every single time that they could and villainize him and give rise to things like birtherism, etc. And it is directly attributed to the rise in the gun culture here in the United States, the right-wing conspiracy theories and so on. And that makes our world in the United States a little more dangerous because the right-wing ideologies also are separatist ideologies, isolationist ideologies,
nationalism ideologies. And you're right on, Heidi. This is exactly where I was going to go. Is we're experiencing nationalism on a global level. It's always occurred to some degree, but never in so many democratic countries.
Anywhere you have Fox News and a Fox News outlet, in those countries, they've had a rise in nationalism, and that's a statistical fact.
And not necessarily, yes, a Fox News outlet, but remember, Fox News also runs their programs on thousands of conservative media airwaves. On 3,200 Christian media airwaves, Fox News syndicates their stories, their infotainers, their Hannitys. And that's just in the religious aspect. So we're looking at 8,000 radio stations that are streaming Fox's pundits and ideologies.
Right. And in fact, in doing the research of this, we're just going to talk about radio stations here for a minute. Every day, there's 2,570 hours of conservative talk radio every single day, compared to progressive talk radio, which only makes up 254 hours, period. In parts of the country, let's say Atlanta, Houston, Dallas, you can't get anything but 100% conservative radio talk all day, every day. Even in Washington, D.C., it makes up 69% of the media coverage. Now, why is that important? 90% of us still turn on the radio at some time during the day. Either we can't get our Bluetooth to work, or we need to get get a traffic update.
90% of adults listen to the radio every day.
Yeah, 90% of adults. And a lot of times, you have to understand, poor demographics, older demographics don't have Bluetooth capability. You have, boomers like me, we don't have Bluetooth a lot of times in our cars, or we have to ask our children to hook it up.
I'm there with that.
So, when you have this demographic, poor people that don't own newer model vehicles, people who don't opt for Sirius radio or can't afford it.
People who live in areas where wireless is not easily accessible. I mean, we're just 90 miles west of Chicago out here. And if you don't have a specific carrier because of the geography of it, you can't get a signal.
You can't get broadband. There are areas...
and you can't even get a cellular signal.
No.
So to try to listen to something, if you had an unlimited data plan, you still are not even able to get a signal half the time.
And we think that there's a lot of you that fall into that same category. As my husband and I traveled, did our tour through the Great Red Divide in September, there were many places we couldn't get cell signal. We couldn't get satellite radio to work. We couldn't even get our GPS to work. So that's why we carried maps with us, because
she's absolutely right. It'll go out and you have no idea.
You have no idea where you are.
And it happens all over the country.
It drops out. And the thing is when you're talking about getting your news that you can use, if your news comes to you so slanted and you don't know that there's another viewpoint because there's no doctrine to demand that anymore, you don't know what you don't know.
So if in this situation, you have 5 times the amount of conservative stations to progressive stations.
You have 100 times or 1,000 times, actually 1,000 times of news hours broadcast each day.
That are focused from a conservative standpoint, as opposed to a regular.
1,000 times.
So imagine that, and now put that in all of the areas where you have a hard time getting information, and that's what you're hearing.
Yeah, and across the Great Red Divide, the middle part of the country, any type of rural area, and we're talking anything from rural West Virginia to rural Kentucky, anywhere in the United States where it is more rural, you don't get media, and you certainly don't get fair and balanced media.
And we forget that so much of the United States is geographically different.
Right.
And that so much of it is rural. That doesn't mean that the population densities are rural. That's not what we're saying, but we're saying there are people, and if you add them all up, they add up to the population densities that are stuck in these.
And conservatives always say that they love uneducated voters. And the thing is people are uneducated on purpose. And we're not talking about public school education. We're talking about media education, because a lot of people, once you leave high school or college, you don't get, media input anymore. You're learning ceases.
That's a scary thought, that pretty much high school, if you're lucky, is the last time you get actual facts, which we don't.
Right.
That's a whole other rabbit hole.
That's a whole nother rabbit hole. But that is the truth. For most people, they're learning stops whenever they leave public school.
Or whenever they leave school.
Right. Whenever they leave school. So when you're learning stops at that point, and then the only education sources you have are conservative news, and talk and entertainment.
That brings us to our young man we talked to at the Andrew Yang. When we met Andrew Yang a few weeks ago. He was a young man from Iowa, conservative. The only thing they ever heard was conservative. The only radio they had was conservative. And some people think we're crazy, but we're not. We've lived it.
Yeah.
And that was his community, and that was his newspaper. And he went away to the Navy, and all of a sudden his world opened up. He saw that things were very different from how they were portrayed.
Yeah. So instead of discussing Hannity every night after the show or the next day at the water cooler, people were talking about different news and views from around the world. And his eyes opened. He's like, you mean it's not just whatever Sean Hannity says?
Yes. So now Sean Hannity rose because of Roger Ailes and Robert Murdoch. Wouldn't you love to have been a fly on that wall? Or it was before the internet. Mm-hmm. It was before cell phones. How did the two of them hook up? Was there like an underground white nationalist movement worldwide that they connected through?
Yes.
Because, the two's aligned, and Murdoch's entire thing is to unstabilize
the United States, specifically.
All
the world.
His fingers are everywhere.
Everywhere. But he specifically embraces nationalism and isolationism, and he specifically wants to prove how dumb and uneducated the world is, and that they're lazy learners, and they're welcome this broadcast to just wash over them and tell them how to think and feel. And Murray and I talk about this all the time, how I don't watch cable news because I don't want anybody to tell me how to think and feel. And Murray does her due diligence, and she watches it for me.
I do. I watch all of them. I even watch Fox. I do, and I listen to all the different media, because if we don't understand what they're saying, how do we know to debunk it or to give facts?
So she brings it to me, and then I have to look up all the facts because I can't stand what she's telling me. Like, they said what? But I think anytime, and Marie hammers me all the time because I use something called mediabias.com. I use Media Bias, that website, to check the sources, and whether they're too far left or too far right, I discredit them. If you're going to use a hot button word to try to convince me to think a certain way, I don't need you. Right. Mm-hmm. So I try to find things that are going to allow me to make up my own mind, because that's my fight in life, is let me think, let me think clearly, so I have my belief system rooted in reality. But most people don't go through that. And, we talk a lot about fake news and fake news sites and how to spot a fake story. Well, anytime, pardon me, my stomach's growling.
I thought that was my stomach.
It was me. So, anytime we go through and you see a story and you wonder if it's fake or not, I just run it through, there's lots of great sites. There's PolitiFact, there's, Snopes, there's and then my Media Bias, and I always look at the source and I say, well, that source is deliberately there to make you upset. It's deliberately made to inflame you.
And that moves us into a whole other realm that we're going to address. In fact, Forbes, as of yesterday, January 20th, maybe?
Yesterday.
As of yesterday, Forbes just did it about bringing the fairness doctrine back to bringing the fairness doctrine into social media, which plays into Facebook, and it plays into a whole other wealth. But if we don't think about this, and we don't start applying things like this, look what happened. We had the fairness doctrine. The legislators and our government thought, hey, we need to really be careful that people are still getting information from both sides. It was slowly eroded away.
Yes.
The FCC's power grew to make their own decisions.
Yeah.
Enter Herr Goebbels, also known as Roger Ailes.
Yeah.
And a
The disgraced
billionaire,
Roger Ailes.
and a billionaire in another part of the world who is slowly building that nationalist movement.
Right. Murdoch.
So it all ties together, and then it becomes more eroded, and finally it's completely removed because of Roger Ailes and Ronald Reagan deciding that we're going to go ahead and veto that legislation. So that leads us to where we are today. Why you don't have to hear the other side on Hannity. Why one news program can only present one side of an issue. Why 8,000 radio stations in the United States, or how many hours, Heidi?
Okay. Well, like I said, every day, 2,570 hours of conservative talk every day. 91% of radio is conservative. 91%.
90% of adults hear radio at some point in their day.
Either it's on in their...
Listen to radio.
Yeah, it's often on in places where you shop. It's on in your workplace. It's on in your car. So you're just inundated with radio all the time.
And we had radio, TV, and it advanced. We lost these protections, which were not Republican or Democrat, just basic common sense protections.
And a lot of times...
They were the foundation of journalism.
Right. The foundation of journalism was to give fair and balanced reporting. And we've lost that. We've lost the ability to see truth, to focus on truth, to focus on fact. And losing the fairness doctrine allowed this door to open and allow
Fox News to rise.
To rise.
TV.
Right.
Propaganda, nationalism, conservative talk taking over the airwaves. And we wonder why we're fighting this. And that's what Heidi and I prove time and time again, that when you remove the hot button words,
yes,
when you talk about things in terms of this, and this, pretty much everybody agrees. So who decided we wanted to divide the nation? Who decided that they can have more power if they keep us divided?
Rupert Murdoch and the disgraced Roger Ailes.
All we're saying is think about it.
You have to understand that wanting to restore the fairness doctrine, to limit the amount of stations one company can own in our own area, in any rural area in the United States, you have media giants buying up all of your local newspapers. We have a Sinclair Media, which is in the heart of the Great Red Divide out there in Kansas.
Shaw Media.
Yeah, Shaw Media, which is the local media giant that is buying up all of our local newspapers where we live.
And they're actually a subsidiary of a bigger giant.
Right. And the problem with that is that they take our local news papers that come out every day, and all of a sudden they're not coming out on the weekends anymore, or maybe one day on the weekend, and then they're coming out to only Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, and then pretty soon they're just once a week, and they become, instead of news and information, they become just an ad rag, and people just throw them out.
Well, they also become syndicated. So
yes.
If I have a columnist who is right, I can take away my local reporter. I can take out that local sports section. I can take out and put up my nationalized columnist, which then also spreads the message. So we're getting the exact same message on so many different fronts.
Platforms.
And that's what the conservatives are doing really well, and that's why they're able to divide.
They are controlling media, and when you control media, you control the mind.
Absolutely, because we are heavily influenced.
Right.
So we just wanted you guys to really take a think about that. Thank Ronald Reagan again. Thanks, Ronnie.
I flippin' hate Ronald Reagan. And please go back and...
I have a proposition for any presidential candidate that is still in the race, sans Michael Bennett, because go away. Here's our proposition. The mighty Heartland mamas, tongue-in-cheek saying that, will support you in every endeavor. We will help fundraise. We will knock doors. If any one of you puts in your platform that we need to reinstitute the fairness doctrine.
Oh, amen.
If one of you are willing to make that call, we are 100% behind you, even if it is some of the candidates that we maybe are not as much aligned with. The fairness doctrine is so important, and we need to understand.
One of the candidates running owns a big media giant. Who is that?
And
Bloomberg
he benefits
Media
from the fairness doctrine not
being
in
applied.
play.
Yeah.
So we know Bloomberg isn't going to be the one to.
I don't know. Maybe he'll be the one to come through. I mean, if he puts his money where his mouth is, that could be. But we have to make sure that we not only kind of. We have this thing where where we're supposed to have diversity, that we're not supposed to have everything controlled by one.
Kind of the whole premise of our country founding was not to have one religion, one deciding for everyone in how much. Kind of we were supposed to embrace diversity was kind of the whole pitch we were given.
Right. And right now we're completely slanted. And this is why we always ask you to follow, and share, and subscribe.
And this is
share.
Podcast networks like Demcast USA are so important. There's many voices out there. And I know some of the journalists don't like it, but you're paid by the corporate folks who are telling you what to write. So support journalism, support podcasts, support us, subscribe, share, Heartland Mamas.
But that's why we keep telling you to share, because the only way that a progressive message or democratic message or non-conservative message
get out there
is from you.
Is organically. And we will we'll hit the media from the social media perspective someday soon.
Yeah.
But we have had a great time with you today. We hope we've given you some thoughts, and send your favorite presidential candidate a message saying, hey, let's do the fairness doctrine.
Yeah. Let's make media fair, balanced, and honest again.
We'll see you next time.
Take care.
Heartland Mamas.
MAMAS.com.
Bye.
Bye.